The world had already changed long before anyone realized how dangerous it would become. Massive gates had started appearing without warning, turning peaceful cities into war zones overnight. Nobody understood where the monsters came from, only that humanity suddenly found itself fighting for survival. And in the middle of that chaos, ordinary people were forced to become hunters just to stay alive. Every day felt like the beginning of another disaster waiting to happen. Rumors spread about hunters capable of impossible feats, warriors who could challenge creatures beyond human imagination. But power also created fear. The stronger someone became, the further they drifted away from normal people. To civilians watching from afar, hunters looked less like heroes and more like monsters wearing human faces. And somewhere in that unstable balance, a new figure was quietly beginning to emerge. Unlike the others, he didn't carry himself with arrogance or pride. His eyes remained cold and focused, almost as if he had already seen the worst this world could offer. There was a strange calm surrounding him, the kind that only appears after surviving endless battles. Even without saying a word, his presence alone carried an intimidating weight. And deep down, everyone around him could feel that he was hiding far more strength than he let others see. The atmosphere shifted the moment he started moving. Hunters nearby instinctively watched him with nervous expressions, unable to understand why his presence felt so oppressive. It wasn't just strength they sensed from him. It was experience, the kind earned through countless life or death encounters where hesitation meant death. Even before the fight began, tension had already started spreading through the area. The simple sound of his footsteps echoed louder than expected. In moments like these, silence always became heavier right before violence erupted. He stopped calmly, almost as if he had already predicted everything that was about to happen. Meanwhile, the people behind him struggled to hide their anxiety. Nobody knew whether they were about to witness a battle or a massacre. His expression barely changed, but his eyes sharpened instantly. Something dangerous was approaching, and he noticed it before everyone else did. Hunters usually relied on instinct to survive, but his senses operated on another level entirely. He didn't panic or prepare dramatically. Instead, he simply observed the situation with the confidence of someone who had overcome far worse threats before. The street looked abandoned, but the tension in the air felt suffocating. Survivors had already learned that silence inside dungeon zones was never a good sign. Somewhere nearby, something was waiting patiently for the perfect moment to attack. Hunters tightened their weapons while civilians held their breath. And despite the fear surrounding everyone else, the protagonist remained completely composed. Fear started taking over the weaker hunters almost immediately. They could feel an unnatural pressure building around them, heavy enough to make breathing difficult. Some wanted to run, but their legs refused to move. Others tried convincing themselves they were overreacting. But deep inside, everyone understood the same terrifying truth. Something powerful had arrived. The monsters finally revealed themselves without warning. Their twisted bodies crawled out from the darkness like predators that had been starving for days. Red eyes glowed violently as killing intent flooded the area in an instant. Ordinary hunters would have panicked immediately after seeing creatures like these. But the protagonist didn't even flinch. Anyone else would have considered retreating the moment they saw how badly outnumbered they were. But standing in front of those monsters, he looked almost bored. It was as if he no longer considered creatures like these a genuine threat. The overwhelming confidence in his posture confused everyone watching nearby. They couldn't understand whether he was fearless or simply too powerful to care anymore. The atmosphere exploded into chaos. Dark energy crashed against the surroundings while the monsters charged forward with terrifying speed. Their screams echoed through the ruined streets, sending panic through the weaker hunters. But instead of retreating, the protagonist stepped forward. And the moment he moved, the entire flow of battle started changing. A familiar blue interface suddenly appeared before his eyes. To anyone else, it would have looked impossible, almost supernatural. But for him, these notifications had become part of everyday life. The mysterious system guiding his growth had transformed him from the weakest hunter into something entirely different. And every new battle only pushed him further beyond normal human limits. He slowly raised his head, and the monsters instinctively hesitated for a split second. Predators could recognize danger better than humans ever could. Somewhere deep inside, even those creatures understood they were facing someone abnormal. The pressure radiating from him became heavier with every passing moment. And before anyone could react, the battle truly began. The attack happened so fast that most people couldn't even follow it properly. 1 second, the monsters were charging forward, and the next, their bodies were already being torn apart. Blood sprayed violently through the air as shock spread across every witness nearby. The protagonist moved with terrifying precision, eliminating enemies before they could even defend themselves. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was domination. Each strike carried overwhelming destructive power. The monsters that moments ago seemed unstoppable were now collapsing one after another without resistance. Hunters watching from the back could barely process what they were seeing. The gap between him and ordinary hunters felt almost unfair. And the more he fought, the clearer it became that his true strength still hadn't fully appeared yet. His movements blurred across the battlefield like a shadow impossible to catch. Monsters desperately tried attacking him, but every attempt failed before it even reached him. He flowed through the battlefield effortlessly, turning overwhelming odds into complete control. The confidence in his expression never disappeared for even a second. For him, battles like this had become routine. The battlefield quickly transformed into chaos and destruction. Bodies crashed against the ground while the surviving monsters retreated instinctively. Fear had finally replaced their aggression. Even creatures driven by pure violence could understand when death was unavoidable. And standing at the center of it all, the protagonist looked more like a disaster than a human hunter. There wasn't even excitement in his eyes anymore. That was the most terrifying part. He fought with the calmness of someone who had already surpassed ordinary emotions during battle. Killing monsters no longer raised his heartbeat or made him nervous. Instead, it simply felt like another step towards something much bigger waiting ahead. The ground cracked violently under the force of another attack. Shockwaves spread outward, forcing nearby hunters to shield themselves from the pressure alone. Nobody could believe a single person was producing this level of destruction. Every move he made completely shattered their understanding of what hunters were supposed to be capable of. And yet somehow, he still looked like he was holding back. Silence slowly returned after the final monster collapsed. The surviving hunters stared at the battlefield in disbelief, unable to process how quickly everything had ended. Only moments earlier, they genuinely believed they were about to die. But now the threat had disappeared almost effortlessly. And as the protagonist quietly stood among the destruction, one thought echoed in everyone's mind. Just how strong had he really become? Nobody spoke for several seconds after the battle ended. The surviving hunters simply stood there, trying to calm their breathing while staring at the young man in front of them. What they had witnessed felt unreal, almost impossible to accept. Monsters that normally required entire teams to defeat had been erased by one person alone. And despite everything he had just done, the protagonist looked completely unaffected. As the tension slowly faded, whispers immediately began spreading among the hunters. Some looked at him with admiration, while others couldn't hide their fear. Strength like his disrupted the balance everyone had grown used to. The protagonist ignored all of it and simply continued walking forward. Praise, fear, suspicion, none of those reactions mattered to him anymore. The younger hunter struggled to hide his excitement while trying to keep up beside him. To someone inexperienced, standing near a hunter of this level felt unbelievable. At the same time, nervousness still lingered in his expression. He had just witnessed a battle far beyond anything he had imagined before. And deep down, he realized he was walking beside someone completely different from ordinary hunters. Even while listening to the younger hunter speak, his expression remained unreadable. Years of fighting had taught him how dangerous emotional distractions could become. He no longer reacted strongly to compliments or excitement. Instead, his mind constantly stayed focused on survival and preparation. Because in this world, danger always returned when people lowered their guard. The destroyed streets served as a reminder of how much the world had changed. Buildings stood abandoned, roads remained damaged, and signs of previous battles covered almost every corner. Humanity had adapted to living beside constant disaster, but the fear never truly disappeared. Every gate that opened carried the possibility of another tragedy, and hunters were the only thing preventing total collapse. The younger hunter hesitated before finally speaking again. There were countless questions running through his mind, especially after witnessing such overwhelming power firsthand. He wanted to understand how someone could become that strong, but at the same time, he feared the answer. Because deep down, everyone knew true strength usually came at a terrible cost. Without slowing down, he quietly fixed his gear and continued forward. Small habits like these revealed just how experienced he had become over time. Every movement felt efficient and controlled, shaped by countless dangerous encounters. Even outside combat, he carried the calmness of someone constantly prepared for another fight. It was impossible to tell whether he was relaxing or remaining alert. The younger hunter finally gathered enough courage to speak more openly. His voice carried genuine admiration, but also uncertainty about the future ahead. Seeing someone this powerful completely changed the way he viewed hunters. Until now, strength had felt like something distant and unreachable. But standing here beside the protagonist made that dream suddenly feel real. For a brief moment, his expression softened slightly. Perhaps the younger hunter reminded him of his own past, back when he was still weak and powerless. Before gaining strength, he had also struggled desperately just to survive another day. The difference now was almost unbelievable. And maybe because of that, he understood better than anyone how cruel this world could become. The tension from battle slowly disappeared as they moved farther from the destroyed area. But even during peaceful moments, hunters could never fully relax. Everyone understood that another gate could open at any time without warning. Life had become unpredictable ever since monsters entered the world. And for those living on the front lines, danger had simply become part of everyday existence. A more experienced hunter approached carefully, clearly trying to measure the protagonist's reaction before speaking. Respect mixed with caution in his voice. After seeing the earlier battle, nobody wanted to offend someone with that level of power. The protagonist listened quietly, giving away almost nothing through his expression. But his silence alone carried enough pressure to make conversations uncomfortable. The conversation quickly shifted toward future raids and dangerous gates appearing nearby. Reports of stronger monsters had been increasing recently, leaving many hunters worried. Some feared another large-scale disaster was approaching. Others hoped powerful hunters like him could keep the situation under control. But deep inside, even the protagonist understood that greater threats were slowly getting closer. Attention naturally followed him wherever he went now. Hunters stared at him with curiosity. Civilians whispered his name quietly, and rumors about his strength continued spreading rapidly. Yet despite all that recognition, he still carried himself like someone isolated from everyone around him. Power created distance. The stronger he became, the harder it was to live like a normal person again. Memories of previous battles flashed through his mind without warning. The monsters he had faced recently were becoming more intelligent and far more dangerous than before. It no longer felt like random attacks from mindless creatures. Something bigger seemed to be happening behind the scenes, and instincts built through endless combat warned him that future battles would become far worse. The younger hunter suddenly realized how serious the situation truly was. Earlier excitement slowly faded as reality settled in. Being a hunter wasn't about fame or glory. It meant constantly risking death while protecting people who could never fully understand that burden. And seeing the protagonist's calm expression made him realize just how much responsibility powerful hunters carried. Without another word, he started walking again. The wind moved quietly around him, while the ruined city stretched endlessly in the distance. Even after gaining incredible power, he still couldn't escape the endless cycle of battles waiting ahead. But unlike before, he no longer walked forward out of desperation alone. Now, he moved with purpose. The younger hunter hurried to catch up, unwilling to lose sight of him. Somewhere along the way, admiration had already turned into determination. Witnessing overwhelming strength firsthand awakened something inside him. Fear still existed, but now it was mixed with motivation instead of helplessness. And perhaps for the first time, he truly understood what kind of hunter he wanted to become. His eyes remained focused far ahead, almost as if he could already see future dangers waiting in the distance. He had survived too much to believe peace would last long. Every victory only led toward another battle. Every powerful enemy defeated revealed the existence of something even stronger. And deep inside, he could feel that his real challenge had not appeared yet. The familiar blue light appeared once more in front of him. Notifications quietly updated his progress, rewards, and growth like an invisible observer constantly watching his journey. The mysterious system had changed every part of his life. Sometimes it felt useful. Other times it felt terrifying. Because no matter how strong he became, he still didn't fully understand why it had chosen him. The world around him continued moving normally, but deep down he understood that nothing was truly normal anymore. Stronger enemies were coming. Larger battles waited ahead. And somewhere beyond the gates, forces far more terrifying than ordinary monsters were already beginning to move. Still, despite everything, he kept walking forward without hesitation. Because turning back was no longer an option. The peaceful atmosphere disappeared almost instantly when another disturbance erupted nearby. Hunters immediately shifted into combat mode, their bodies reacting faster than their thoughts. Experience had taught them that hesitation inside these dangerous zones usually ended in death. The younger hunters looked nervous again, but the protagonist remained calm as always. To him, sudden danger had long since become routine. Powerful attacks burst forward with overwhelming force, shaking the area violently. Hunters unleashed everything they had in an attempt to stop the threat before it grew worse. But despite their efforts, the pressure surrounding the battlefield continued increasing. The clash of energy and destruction turned the once quiet streets into chaos again. And right at the center of it all, the protagonist carefully observed the enemy. The speed of the attack caught several hunters off guard immediately. Sparks and light exploded across the battlefield while people desperately tried to avoid getting caught in the blast. Panic began spreading once more among the weaker members. They understood that this enemy was different from ordinary monsters, and the longer the fight continued, the more dangerous the situation became. The younger hunter froze for a moment after witnessing the sheer power of the collision. His breathing became uneven as fear crept back into his chest. Earlier, confidence vanished instantly under the pressure of real combat. This wasn't training anymore. One mistake here could cost someone their life without warning. Seeing the situation worsen, the protagonist finally moved again. The moment he stepped forward, the atmosphere itself seemed to shift around him. Hunters nearby instinctively relaxed slightly, almost as if his presence alone brought reassurance. He didn't need dramatic speeches or loud confidence. Everyone already knew that once he entered the battle, the odds immediately changed. Energy exploded outward with enough force to shake the surrounding area. The battle escalated so quickly that several hunters could barely keep track of what was happening anymore. Blinding flashes covered the battlefield while shockwaves tore through the streets. But even inside that chaos, the protagonist moved with perfect control. His focus never wavered for even a second. His counterattack came instantly and without hesitation. The force behind his strike completely overwhelmed the enemy's momentum, sending destructive energy ripping across the battlefield. Nearby hunters stared in disbelief once again. Every time they thought they understood his strength, he revealed something even more terrifying. And somehow, his expression still remained completely calm. The impact shattered the surrounding area as debris scattered violently through the air. The enemy staggered backward under the overwhelming force, clearly unprepared for such a powerful response. Shock spread across the battlefield almost immediately. Until this moment, many hunters still doubted whether anyone could truly dominate monsters so completely alone. But now they were witnessing it directly. His eyes narrowed sharply as he analyzed every movement in front of him. Unlike ordinary hunters who relied purely on instinct, he fought with terrifying precision and calculation. Years of surviving deadly encounters had sharpened his senses beyond normal limits. He no longer wasted movements or emotions during battle. Every action existed for one purpose only: victory. The enemy launched another desperate attack, filling the battlefield with violent energy once again. But this time, the hunters watching no longer looked hopeless. Their fear had slowly transformed into confidence after seeing the protagonist fight. Even overwhelming monsters no longer seemed invincible when he stood at the front lines. And that realization alone completely changed the atmosphere. The mysterious system reacted once again as the battle intensified. Blue notifications appeared rapidly before his eyes, tracking his progress like an invisible force guiding his evolution. The more dangerous the battle became, the more opportunities the system seemed to create for him. It almost felt alive at times, and that thought alone remained deeply unsettling. The younger hunter could barely hide the amazement in his expression anymore. Watching someone fight at this level completely shattered his understanding of what hunters were capable of. Fear still existed inside him, but now it was mixed with inspiration. For the first time, he truly saw what overwhelming power looked like, and part of him wanted to reach that level someday. Even while dominating the battle, he never lowered his guard. His instincts constantly searched for hidden threats, knowing battles could change instantly without warning. That caution was one of the reasons he had survived this long. Overconfidence killed countless hunters every year, but he understood better than anyone that survival always mattered more than pride. The battlefield glowed under the intense energy flooding the area. Hunters shielded their eyes while trying to keep up with the overwhelming clash happening before them. Every second of combat pushed the destruction even further. Yet despite the chaos, the protagonist remained completely in control. The difference in strength between him and everyone else felt almost impossible to measure. The enemy's movements finally started slowing down under the constant pressure. Damage covered its body as exhaustion and fear became visible for the first time. Monsters rarely showed hesitation once battle began, but now even this creature understood the terrifying gap separating them. And once fear entered the enemy's eyes, the outcome was already decided. Without wasting the opportunity, he attacked again immediately. His movements remained smooth, efficient, and completely merciless. There was no unnecessary cruelty in the way he fought. He simply eliminated threats as quickly as possible, the same way someone extinguishes a dangerous fire before it spreads. That cold efficiency was exactly what made him so frightening. The final collision shook the ground hard enough to silence everyone nearby. Dust and debris filled the air while hunters stared nervously, waiting to see the result. For a brief moment, everything became still again. Then slowly, the enemy collapsed completely. And just like that, another impossible battle ended under the protagonist's overwhelming strength. Relief spread across the hunters almost immediately. Some dropped to the ground from exhaustion, while others simply laughed nervously, unable to believe they had survived again. Moments earlier, many of them had already accepted death as unavoidable. But once again, the protagonist changed the outcome entirely. His existence alone had become a symbol of hope during disasters. As the remaining energy faded away, he quietly lowered his weapon once more. There was no celebration in his expression, no pride after victory. Battles like these no longer felt special to him. Instead, they simply reminded him that stronger enemies continued appearing one after another. And deep inside, he knew the real war had only just begun. Far beyond the ruined streets and defeated monsters, something larger was already moving behind the scenes. The protagonist could feel it instinctively, even if nobody else noticed yet. Every battle, every gate, every strange change happening recently seemed connected somehow. And while the rest of the world celebrated temporary victories, he kept preparing for the nightmare still waiting ahead. Even after saving everyone once again, he didn't wait around for praise or celebration. The exhausted hunters watched him leave with complicated emotions written across their faces. Some admired him deeply, while others couldn't stop feeling intimidated by the overwhelming gap between them. Strength at that level no longer felt human anymore, and the more they witnessed it, the harder it became to see him as an ordinary hunter. The younger hunter quickly followed behind, clearly unwilling to let the conversation end there. Earlier fear had slowly transformed into curiosity and determination. Watching someone dominate impossible battles awakened a new ambition inside him. He wanted answers. More importantly, he wanted to understand what separated powerful hunters from everyone else. For a brief moment, the protagonist looked back at him quietly. There was no annoyance in his eyes, but also no warmth. Years of fighting had made him emotionally distant from most people around him. Attachments often became weaknesses in dangerous situations. Still, somewhere deep inside, he seemed to understand the younger hunter's feelings better than he admitted. The ruined city around them remained eerily quiet after the battle. Broken buildings and destroyed roads served as reminders of how fragile peace had become. People still tried living normal lives despite the constant danger surrounding them. But everyone understood the truth deep down. One unexpected gate could erase everything again overnight. After hesitating for several seconds, the younger hunter finally asked the question bothering him the most. How could someone become that strong? The protagonist didn't answer immediately, because the truth behind his growth wasn't simple, inspiring, or heroic. It was built through pain, desperation, and endless battles where survival itself had been uncertain. Instead of giving a direct response, he simply continued walking in silence. Sometimes experience taught lessons better than words ever could. Power wasn't something gained overnight through motivation alone. It required sacrifice, fear, and the willingness to keep moving forward even after losing everything. And he had learned those lessons the hard way. Behind them, rumors were already spreading rapidly between the surviving hunters. Stories about his overwhelming strength would reach countless people by the end of the day. Some would exaggerate what happened. Others would refuse to believe it entirely. But one fact remained undeniable. Another monster-level hunter had appeared. His movements remained calm and controlled even after such intense battles. Small habits like checking his equipment revealed how deeply combat had shaped his daily life. Staying prepared at all times had become instinct. In this world, hunters who relaxed too much usually didn't survive long, and he understood that reality better than anyone. The younger hunter's eyes filled with admiration again as he watched quietly. Earlier fear had not disappeared completely, but now it felt different. Instead of feeling helpless, he felt motivated to improve himself. Seeing true strength up close made his previous goals seem small. And for the first time, he started dreaming of reaching far greater heights. For a moment, the atmosphere finally became peaceful again. The sky above the city looked calm, almost normal compared to the destruction below. But appearances meant nothing anymore in this world. Disaster could arrive without warning at any moment, and hunters had learned never to trust temporary silence. Without warning, he suddenly stopped moving. The change was subtle, but the tension in his expression immediately returned. His instincts had noticed something unusual nearby before anyone else realized it. The younger hunter froze nervously after seeing his reaction. If someone this strong became cautious, then the danger ahead had to be serious. A strange pressure slowly spread through the area once again. The surrounding air felt heavier, making weaker hunters instinctively uncomfortable. Experienced fighters immediately recognized the feeling. Something powerful was approaching nearby. And judging by the protagonist's expression, this wasn't an ordinary threat. Whispers and panic quickly spread among the nearby hunters. Some tightened their weapons while others looked around desperately for the source of the pressure. Memories of previous disasters immediately resurfaced in their minds. Nobody wanted another deadly battle so soon after surviving the last one. But reality rarely gave hunters time to rest. His calm expression slowly disappeared as he focused completely on the incoming threat. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't reacting out of fear. He was calculating, measuring the enemy's strength, movement, and intentions before the battle even started. That ability to remain composed under pressure was exactly what separated him from ordinary hunters. Then finally, the source of the pressure revealed itself. A dark silhouette emerged slowly through the swirling energy, radiating overwhelming, killing intent. The atmosphere immediately became suffocating. Even experienced hunters struggled to breathe properly under the enemy's presence. But instead of stepping back, the protagonist quietly stepped forward again. The younger hunter felt his body freeze instantly after seeing the creature appear. Every instinct inside him screamed danger. Earlier battles suddenly seemed insignificant compared to this overwhelming presence. For the first time, he truly understood how terrifying high-level monsters could become. And standing beside the protagonist was the only thing keeping him from panicking completely. Despite the crushing pressure surrounding the battlefield, the protagonist remained steady. He slowly prepared himself for battle without unnecessary movements or dramatic reactions. To everyone watching nearby, that calmness felt unbelievable. Most hunters would already be overwhelmed by fear in this situation, but he faced the danger with complete focus instead. The creature unleashed a terrifying wave of energy that shook the surroundings violently. Buildings trembled while weaker hunters stumbled backward under the pressure alone. This enemy clearly existed on a completely different level from previous monsters. Even the air itself felt dangerous now. And deep down, everyone realized the upcoming battle would decide far more than just their survival. For several tense seconds, neither side moved. The protagonist and the monster simply stared at each other silently, both recognizing the danger standing before them. Hunters watching nearby could barely endure the tension filling the battlefield. It felt less like a normal confrontation and more like two disasters preparing to collide. The atmosphere reached its breaking point. Hunters held their breath while the monster's killing intent spread across the ruined city. And standing at the center of that overwhelming pressure, the protagonist calmly prepared for another impossible battle. Because once again, the fate of everyone nearby was about to depend entirely on him. Without warning, the creature attacked first with terrifying speed. The explosion of dark energy tore across the battlefield violently, forcing nearby hunters to retreat immediately. Panic spread through the area as the pressure became almost unbearable. But while everyone else reacted in fear, the protagonist moved calmly toward the attack instead. He understood that hesitation here would only lead to death. The collision between them shook the surroundings hard enough to crack the ground beneath their feet. Energy erupted everywhere as the two forces crashed against each other head-on. Hunters watching nearby could barely follow their movements anymore. The battle had already surpassed anything they had witnessed before, and deep inside, they realized they were watching a fight between monsters. The protagonist countered instantly, his attacks moving faster and more precisely than before. Every strike carried overwhelming force, capable of tearing through powerful enemies effortlessly. The monster tried resisting, but the balance of the battle slowly began shifting. Even against something this dangerous, the protagonist refused to lose control. His experience and composure continued dominating the fight. The younger hunter could only stare in disbelief as the battle unfolded before his eyes. Fear tightened his chest, yet admiration burned even stronger than before. Watching someone confront such a terrifying enemy without hesitation felt unreal. At that moment, he finally understood the true meaning of strength. It wasn't just power. It was the courage to face impossible danger directly. gathering his strength into one final movement. The protagonist unleashed a devastating attack that completely overwhelmed the monster. The impact exploded across the battlefield as dark energy shattered violently around them. For a brief second, silence filled the area once again. Then, slowly, the creature collapsed under the force of his strike. Another impossible enemy had fallen. As the dust finally settled, the surviving hunters stared at him in complete silence. Relief, shock, and disbelief mixed together across every face nearby. Once again, he had protected everyone from a disaster that should have been impossible to survive. But while others celebrated survival, the protagonist quietly looked toward the distance with a serious expression. Because deep down, he already knew this was only the beginning of far greater battles waiting ahead.
If you made it this far, then you already know. On Kain, the impossible is just the beginning. Subscribe now and don't miss the next chapter.